You know what a genuinely strange feeling is? Being with someone who clearly loves you and still feeling hollow. It's not because they did something or the relationship is falling apart. Just this low, constant hum of something being off. The love is there. You can see it. You can point to it. But you can't seem to absorb it. It lands on the surface and doesn't go any deeper. And here's the part that makes it worse. You know this is good. You know they care. Some part of you can draw up an entire list of reasons why. But some other part of you, the part that runs quieter and deeper than logic, isn't convinced. It's sitting in a room full of proof and still feeling alone. That's the thing that has no explanation. Not the being unloved part, but knowing you're loved but not feeling it part. That's what this is actually about. This isn't a video about bad relationships, emotional unavailability, or red flags. That's a different conversation. This is about something more uncomfortable. The situation where the love is real and present, the person is genuine, and you still can't quite receive it. Where a perfectly good relationship leaves you emotionally unsatisfied in a way you can't fully justify or explain to anyone, including yourself. And what I want to explore is why that happens. Not with a clean, singular answer, because there isn't one, but by looking at a few overlapping things. About how some people learn to interpret love, what emotional history quietly teaches us to expect, and something that doesn't get said enough, that the gap isn't always between you and the other person. Sometimes it's between what's being given and what you're actually able to take in. Some people don't just want love. They need to feel it moving, not in a dramatic way, but they need to sense it arriving, consistently, visibly, in real time. And the way that tends to get set up is really specific to how relationships start. Think about the first few months with someone. Everything has velocity. Replies are immediate. Conversations spiral past midnight. The other person seems to rearrange things just to see you. Your brain takes all of that in and doesn't just enjoy it, it catalogs it. Quietly, without asking your permission, it says, this is what this feels like when it's real. That's the template. That's the baseline your emotional system uses from that point forward. So when the relationship settles, and it always does, when things get quieter because you're both more certain, more comfortable, less performative, that change doesn't register emotionally as stability. It registers as a withdrawal. The volume dropped, and volume was how you were measuring it. The other person isn't doing anything wrong. They're not pulling back. They're arriving. They've moved past the proving phase into the trusting phase. But if your nervous system learned to read love through intensity, then trust feels like distance. Security feels like fading. And the cruelest part of that dynamic is that it's completely invisible to them. They think everything is fine. They're right that everything is fine. But you're tracking a signal they don't even know they stopped sending. Here's what nobody talks about. It's never the big moments that do it. It's a text, a callback that didn't come, 4 hours of silence when you could see they were online. And rationally, you know that means nothing. People get busy, get distracted, get absorbed in their own lives. That's just how it works. But knowing that doesn't stop the small thing from landing like a verdict. Because for someone who reads love through effort and prioritization, small actions aren't neutral. They're data. A missed callback isn't just a missed callback. It's a question. Would they have called back faster if it were someone else? A delayed reply means I wasn't the thing they were thinking about. And once that reading begins, it compounds. Not into a fight, not into an accusation. Just this slow internal accumulation. A quiet case is being built against the relationship, one small piece at a time. And here's the thing that makes it almost impossible to interrupt. By the time you notice you're doing it, you've already moved from searching for evidence to confirming what already feels true. You're not assessing the situation anymore. You're validating a conclusion your gut reached 3 incidents ago. That's not paranoia. That's how attention works when the emotional stakes are high enough. It filters for what it's already afraid of. What most people miss is that the problem isn't the sensitivity. It's that the sensitivity got calibrated to a level of detail that no real relationship can consistently satisfy. And nobody built that in consciously. It just happened, through a combination of early experience and what got quietly learned about how love demonstrates itself. This is the layer that tends to get skipped over, and I think it's the most important one. When we talk about feeling unloved, the conversation almost always focuses outward, on what the other person is or isn't doing. Whether they're showing up enough, whether they're communicating enough, whether their actions match their words. That's where the analysis goes. That's where the grief tends to go, too. But there's another angle that's harder to sit with. And it's the question of what happens between the love being expressed and the love being received. Because that gap isn't just air. Something happens in that space. The signal comes in, and before it can land, it goes through a filter. a set of interpretations, expectations, and emotional patterns that were built long before this relationship, long before this person. And that filter is not neutral. It's been taught. It learned that love looks a certain way, moves at a certain pace, and proves itself through specific gestures. So when love arrives in a different form, quieter, more settled, expressed through reliability instead of reach, the filter doesn't know what to do with it. It doesn't reject it exactly. It just doesn't fully process it. The signal is there, but something inside doesn't let it land. That's uncomfortable to acknowledge because it means the gap might be at least partly internal. Not a failure of the relationship, not a deficiency in the other person, but something is happening in the way you receive what's being offered. And recognizing that isn't self-blame, it's just accuracy. Because if you can't see the filter, you can't do anything about it. You'll spend the whole relationship looking outward for a solution to something that's partly living inside you. Here's something worth thinking about, honestly. That early period of a relationship, the intensity phase, the one where everything had urgency and electricity, that didn't just feel good. It taught you something. It set a standard that your emotions adopted without your conscious agreement. And the thing is, that standard was set during a period that was never designed to be representative. Early stage intensity is almost entirely a product of novelty. It's neurochemical. It's two people performing their best selves and lighting up at the sight of each other. Beautiful, genuine, and completely unsustainable. But if your emotional memory holds that period as the reference point for what this relationship is supposed to feel like, then everything after it looks like erosion. The transition from pursuit to partnership, from proving love to trusting it, doesn't feel like evolution. It feels like a loss. Real love, the sustained kind, is actually quieter. It shows up on ordinary days, in boring moments, in consistency that never announces itself. But if your system was calibrated to volume, that version barely registers. You end up in a situation where you're holding something genuinely valuable, and it keeps slipping through because it doesn't feel the way valuable is supposed to feel. Loud isn't the same as deep, but when loud was your introduction, deep can feel like absence. There's a final layer to this that matters. Some people experience love primarily as effort, as initiative, follow-through, visible prioritization. It's not about grand gestures. It's about the small, consistent signals that say, I thought of you. I made time. You were on my mind. That's the language. That's what love sounds like, internally, to them. And when that's your language, you notice everything in it. Who reached out first? Who made the plan? Who had an hour to exist online, but not 2 minutes to check in? These aren't scorecards, exactly. They're readings. Your brain is doing ongoing math on a very specific question. Where do I actually land in this person's life? The other person, meanwhile, might be expressing love through something else entirely. Through steadiness, through showing up during hard things, through simply not going anywhere. That's real. That's not a lesser version. But it's arriving in a form your system wasn't tuned to receive, so it doesn't fully register. Not because they're failing, and not because you're broken, but because two people can have different native emotional languages and only find out much later that they've been talking past each other the whole time. What tends to happen instead of recognizing that is, the gap gets interpreted as a deficit. Not that we communicate differently, but they don't love me enough. And that interpretation, once it settles in, starts reshaping everything. It changes how you respond, how available you let yourself be, and how much you protect yourself. You withdraw before anything bad happens. You create distance to avoid the possibility of feeling the distance. And the relationship starts suffering from a wound that was never actually inflicted. I want to stop and say something that isn't usually said in this kind of conversation. If you're recognizing yourself in any of this, and not just slightly, but in a way that sits uncomfortably, the instinct is usually to try to logic your way out of it. Tell yourself you're overreacting. Remind yourself of the evidence. Talk yourself back to rational ground. And sometimes that works for an hour or a day. But it doesn't hold, because the experience isn't being generated by your thinking. It's coming from somewhere underneath that, from a layer that doesn't respond to argument. What's actually happening is that your emotional system developed very specific expectations about what love looks and feels like in real time. It didn't do that to make your life difficult. It was trying to learn the pattern, to know what to look for, to have a way of orienting in relationships. But the pattern it learned was formed during a phase that was never going to last. And now it's applying that early stage template to a relationship that has moved somewhere else entirely. The withdrawal, the overthinking, the preemptive distancing. Those aren't flaws. They're what the system does when love starts feeling uncertain. They're protective responses designed for a threat that probably isn't there. And the real cost of them isn't to the other person, though it absolutely affects the other person. The real cost is that you spend large portions of an actually good relationship, partially absent from it, braced, monitoring, never quite letting it reach you. So where does that leave you? Honestly, I don't think it leaves you with a solution, and I'm a little suspicious of anyone who says it does. But I do think it leaves you with a different question. Not why won't they love me the way I need, but what is my system filtering out, and why? Because if the gap is at least partly internal, if part of what's happening is that love is coming in and not quite landing, then the place to look isn't only outward, it's at the point where the signal meets you, what you let through. What do you require as proof before something registers as real? That's not comfortable. It requires being honest about things that feel like they should be the other person's responsibility. But it's also where the actual movement is, because you can't control how someone else expresses love. You can only look at your own filter, what it was taught, what it learned to expect, and whether that learning still serves you. There's a version of love that doesn't announce itself. That doesn't perform urgency, respond immediately, or track your last seen timestamp. That just stays. That shows up in small ways, on ordinary days, without ceremony. And for some people, that version, the quietest, most durable version, never fully arrives because something in them keeps the door most of the way closed, waiting for the kind of love that already came and went in the first chapter. That's not an absence of love. That's a gap between being loved and being able to receive it. And the gap doesn't close by asking the other person to be louder. It closes, slowly, imperfectly, by getting honest about what your system was taught to need and deciding whether that's still what you actually want. If any part of this landed somewhere real for you, not just intellectually, but in that quieter place, I genuinely want to hear what it was. Drop it in the comments. Because this is one of those things people carry mostly alone, and sometimes the most useful thing is just knowing someone else recognized the same thing in themselves.